Digestion and mental health. Poor digestion is most often involved in mental illness. Improving digestion and nutritional status will improve mental health. This is another core foundational precept. No matter what else we do, if we can improve digestive status and improve nutritional status, feed the body, mind optimally, we are going to get improvements in mental well-being. And here you see an image of our gut, of our stomach, our small intestine, our large intestine, the rectum and the anus. This is much of where poor digestion resides, but not the only place. And we're going to explore that in this lecture. Emotional distress and digestive distress is bidirectional in its effect. If we're distressed emotionally, it's going to affect our ability to digest food. And our ability to digest food, or our inability, is going to affect our emotional status. Where there is mental illness, there is digestive disease. And I guarantee you, if you ask any number of your clients with any kind of mental dis-ease, you will identify mental and physical distress, particularly digestive distress, in any place along the digestive process. Digestion occurs in a parasympathetic state of consciousness. We need to be relaxed for all of the intricate releases of juices that are going to break down food. We need to be relaxed for peristalsis, that undulating rhythm of the intestines and colon to move food through us. Think about chewing and swallowing. If you're stressed, you may not chew your food fully. You may swallow big pieces. Swallowing big pieces may also put stress on the esophagus. Certainly, we know the esophagus experiences a great deal of distress, for example, in GERD. The liver is central to a well-functioning digestive system. What about chronic or excessive drug use or alcohol use, poor quality fats, how that affects the liver and the digestive process? We know that what goes along with drug and alcohol abuse is also very poor digestion, often very limited food intake or poor quality food intake. The stomach, also central to the digestive process. And we see in particular challenges to nutritional status among people who've had bariatric surgery. A secondary sequela of surgery that affects nutritional status, leading to often other addictions and also depression, anxiety, even suicidality. The intestines, small and large, there are very significant rates of inflammatory bowel disorder, lots of leaky gut, inflamed colitis, challenges that we work with. And then the final step along the route, elimination. The challenges that people may have with either a hyper-elimination called diarrhea or a hypo-elimination of constipation. All of these processes are going to be improved by improving diet, and by improving diet and digestion, we're going to improve mental health. As we feel better mentally and emotionally, we're going to be more inclined to improve our digestion. Remember, chronic stress leads to inflammation. Inflammation underlies depression. Depression underlies self-medication behaviors, which in turn are going to upset the balance of digestion. What are the requirements for healthy digestion? We need to be relaxed. Good food quality is important. Food that we're meant to take in biologically. Avoid the synthetic substances, what we can't really digest and absorb and utilize. How we prepare food is going to influence how well we digest. We can tolerate a little bit of fried food, but not every day. Maybe an occasional special deep fried special potato maybe, but every day the liver will be taxed, the gallbladder will be stagnant, and the poor quality fats are going to affect inflammatory process. They're going to affect the arteries and thereby affect the brain. Stomach. Do we have enough hydrochloric acid, which digests protein? That's what bathes the protein that we eat, and we tend to lose hydrochloric acid as we age. Do we need to supplement with a little hydrochloric acid? Of course, the liver and gallbladder are essential. As we've discussed, bile, so important to emulsify fats and utilize them in the body. The pancreas is ever so important for releasing digestive enzymes, and we may find that we are a little deficient in these enzymes. Maybe someone on a purely cooked food diet will be deficient in those enzymes from the diet itself, which work in tandem with digestive enzymes to break down food and utilize it. We may decide that supplementing with some digestive enzymes is a very simple intervention to begin with. The small intestines, we absorb foods, we absorb the nutrients into the bloodstream through the small intestine. But what happens if we've torn up that intestine with gluten, for example, that has frayed it, calling what's called a leaky gut syndrome, which I'll explore in a bit. And then, of course, peristalsis and elimination. That's part of our psychobiorhythm, peristalsis, the moving of this large intestine to move waste product through, to fill it out with fiber and water so that it can move smoothly to the elimination. We know that stress of all kinds are going to affect that elimination process. So what are some additional requirements for digestion? Remember, digestion is a north to south process. It begins in the mouth and ends with the rectum. It begins in the brain, where we begin to smell and taste stimulates our saliva, and our saliva begins the process of breaking down carbohydrates. The stomach and the proteins are worked on by protease. And then the bolus of food passes into the small intestine, where lipase breaks down the fats and amylase finishes off the carbohydrates. Now, if we eat too much food or too many different kinds of foods, sometimes the body gets a little confused. And so if you have trouble digesting, I always recommend simplifying the types of foods that you eat. Focus on a protein, which works well with leafy greens, or focus just on your carbohydrate starches. One of the reasons people find beans hard to digest is it's a mix of protein and carbs, which don't always mix well together, meaning the starchy carbs. Most of digestion and absorption takes place in the small intestine. There, micronutrients are broken down and they're passed through the villi, the little fine hairs, into the gut and thereby into the bloodstream. But intestinal permeability, a breakdown of the boundaries in the gut due to all kinds of food or emotional stressors, lead to what I think of as an image of almost like a torn up sponge, where too much passes through that small intestine. And we'll explore that later when we discuss leaky gut. So digestion occurs in a state of relaxation. It can slow down or stop the digestive process. It can contribute to hiccups, which is a spasm in the diaphragm, heartburn, our general term for gastroesophageal reflux, nausea, diarrhea, and constipation. Stress exacerbates the symptoms of digestive disorders, for example, inflammatory bowel disease, stomach ulcers, and celiac disease. So all of the good work we do in stress reduction is going to increase digestive capacity. I'm going to walk you the next step through improving food and digestive ability to increase that digestive capacity as well. Think about digestion and hormones and their complex relationship. They're an important part of the digestive process. They regulate appetite, they regulate digestive juices, and the nerves connect the brain, the spinal cord, the digestive organs, and they release chemicals that stimulate either the contraction or the relaxation of the GI tract muscles. Hunger hormones are produced and released by the stomach and the small intestine lining. This is one of the principles behind bariatric surgery, is reducing the effects of those hormones. There's a long-time association between stress and digestive upset. There's a long-time association between anxiety and digestive problems. Relaxation achieved through mindfulness can be very helpful. And I've provided you here with a mindfulness exercise called the raisin exercise, and also an audio with, where I lead you through a digestive body scan that you can use and feel free to use for yourself or to share with your clients or re-record using your own voice. Let's talk a minute about digestion, GERD, and PTSD. There's a bidirectional effect of GERD on depression and anxiety. There are very high rates of GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disorder, in people with chronic stress and PTSD. What happens in GERD is that stress affects digestion at the esophageal sphincter. If the sphincter does not close effectively, this allows stomach acid to come back up through the esophagus, and this creates what we call acid reflux. There are high rates of acid reflux in people with PTSD for good reasons. There's just a lot of stress that's altering, again, this rhythmic function of the sphincter. And proton pump inhibitors, one of the common pharmaceutical treatments used to decrease acid, is known to be associated with severe cognitive decline and dementia. So I want to work with my clients to improve their digestion, relax so that they can improve their GERD, but also we know that eating refined carbohydrates and sugar are one of the major causes of GERD. Now, in medicine, we know that foods like acid foods like oranges and coffee are not good for GERD either. But lesser known is the refined carbohydrates, which should be eliminated entirely. So let's look at digesting GERD and PTSD. And here you see an image of the esophagus and the lower esophagus sphincter when it's closed, and then where it's open, where it allows the acid to come back up through the esophagus. So we eliminate refined carbohydrates, sugar, and acid foods, coffee and tea, which are high in tannins, very acidic, and citrus, and all of these will help relax the sphincter. Now, there are two opposing theories about the cause of GERD. One in allopathic medicine suggests it's an excess of acid. However, in integrative or functional medicine or naturopathic medicine, it's considered to be a problem of too little acid that's available to actually sufficiently and efficiently digest the food. And so you'll see in allopathy, the proton pump inhibitors, the TUMS, the calcium carbonate, but in naturopathic approaches, you'll see a supplementation of hydrochloric acid. And in my own practice, what I observe is that we often have to alleviate the discomfort and alleviate the pain by increasing relaxation, eliminating the poor quality foods and the acid foods that are contributing to the GERD. And I use chlorophyll and what's called vitamin U to soothe the mucous membranes and reduce the inflammation in the stomach lining. Once we do that, we slowly add in hydrochloric acid in the form of supplements. And so in many ways, we take the best of both worlds. That's what makes it integrative. We recognize the acidic nature, the over-acid nature of the symptoms. We've got to treat that first, and then we can provide supplements and keeping away from some of these causative factors, such as the refined foods, the sugar pops and those kinds of items. And you can have very good success. Now, clearly there are some people that have significant syndromes, Barrett's syndrome, or may require surgery. That will certainly require a consult. The reason this is so important is that if we don't digest food, beginning in the mouth and then letting it sit in the stomach where it's broken down by acids, then we're going to have problems every step of the way in the small intestine, the large intestine following. So begin in the mouth, begin at the top, at the northern part of the pole, and work your way south in supporting the digestive process. Small meals, eating mindfully, loose clothing also helps. Gentle abdominal massage, which I will share with you how to do, both for yourself or for your family members. And I teach my clients how to do this for themselves, or I have a couple come in and teach them how to do it for themselves. It's very deeply relaxing. We've got lots of lymph nodes in the belly, and it's very calming as well as aiding digestion. The other trick that I was taught by Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez, the famed immunologist, is to put an ice pack right on the esophageal sphincter. And you'll find this right where your sternum ends and right where your ribs begin, right at that V. And you take an ice pack and you put it on there about 15 minutes before a meal and hold it for 10 or 15 minutes. And what this does is it causes a contraction of the esophageal sphincter before you eat. And it also feels good and is deeply relaxing. So again, we're building our integrative approach to the treatment of GERD that we see very commonly co-occur in PTSD and stress diseases. What are some essential steps for relaxed digestion? Eat in places that induce relaxation. Employ rituals such as communal eating, eating with others, enjoying yourself, giving thanks, having potlucks. Breathe slowly and rhythmically before eating. Eat with others when possible, and don't respond to the distractions of TV or the computer. And then also put your fork down or your spoon down between bites and let it sit 15 to 30 minutes. It takes about 20 minutes for satiety to kick in. And so this is a good weight loss approach too, as well as addressing any kind of digestive process. Chew food 50 times or until it's almost liquid. Set the nutrients on the table in the kitchen, whether they're going to be taken before meal or after the meal. So if you're going to take some digestive enzymes, have it right there with you. And most nutrients are best taken about midway through your meal. Don't take them on an empty stomach. There are some exceptions that we'll explore. And don't take them after the meal, particularly your digestive enzymes, particularly plant digestive enzymes, are very beneficial mid-meal. And if you're going to take hydrochloric acid, take it in the middle to 3/4 of the way through your meal. Reducing or eliminating these 3 major stress factors should be included in your goal setting with your client early on: smoking, caffeine, alcohol consumption. That's where you can begin phasing out each of those behaviors one by one. There is nothing that feels quite so bad as acid reflux. Let's think about digestion and medications. Impaired digestion of protein directly affects mood, sleep, and cravings. This often leads to lots of medication use. The overuse of antibiotics, along with insufficient prebiotics in the diet, cause mood problems like depression and anxiety. Let me say contributes to mood problems. The theory of mood disorders is primarily based in neurotransmitter imbalance has never been proven. This is digestion, neurotransmitters, and amino acids. There are multiple influences on mood and cognition, and neurotransmitters are a function of one of them. And neurotransmitters are essential because digestion, as we will see, underlies the creation and manufacture of those neurotransmitters, not only food, but the metabolic processes in a healthy digestive tract. So this is central to improving neurotransmitter function in the brain. But it's not the only factor. And this, I think, speaks to why we get limited results in the use of a lot of psychotropic medications. Not only are they genetically misaligned, but there's limited efficacy, the research will show us. Fats, fat metabolism, and brain phospholipid impairment is an important contributing factor to brain health and mood. Pharmaceutical-grade amino acids are something we use to address biochemical needs. And those are one example of the exception of where we take amino acids on an empty stomach so they don't compete with the amino acids in the proteins in the foods that we eat. Amino acids are going to be a core component of our integrative approach to treatment of mood disorders and mental dis-ease in general. And we're going to explore this in later modules as we explore protocols for different kinds of diagnostic categories. Let's look for a moment at digestion and supplemental enzymes. I mentioned that enzymes are found in raw foods. If you cook food, generally those enzymes are eliminated. Now, it's the very rare person that it's going to eat an all-raw diet, and that may not be indicated anyway for everyone. I think in general, a mix of both raw and cooked food is ideal for everybody. But keep in mind, we get those digestive enzymes that are not endogenous to us from raw foods. Think about balancing your diet with 50% raw and 50% cooked. Maybe you bake a chicken and you have a raw salad. Maybe you have some raw fruit and you have lentil soup. It's not too difficult to look at your whole day and say, where am I supplementing raw and balancing that with cooked? Raw food is actually more difficult to digest. And so when I'm working with someone who hasn't eaten raw food, I'm going to introduce that very slowly into their dietary change. Aging and medication also reduce enzyme levels in the body. And so keep that in mind, that I have found almost everyone is a candidate for digestive enzyme support. Let's talk about digestion and supplemental enzymes. One of my favorite enzymes are called proteolytic enzymes. This word broken down, proteo means protein, lytic meaning digesting. Proteolytic digest your protein when you eat it, but they also digest the proteins of inflammation. And so we use proteolytic enzymes to enhance digestive capacity, breaking down a protein meal. But when you take it on an empty stomach, it will break down inflammation in the body. And those of you who are athletic know that after a hard workout, you can take some proteolytic enzymes and digest the inflammation that came from that hard workout. Indeed, we know that some people who overtrain have chronic low levels of inflammation. They could be healthy otherwise, but too much training can lead to this. And so proteolytic enzymes are a marvelous intervention for chronic pain, intervention, and as well as protein digesting when taken with food. Amylase begins in the mouth and digests carbohydrates. Lipase, you hear the word lipid, lipase, lipids are fats. In fats, cellulase helps digest fiber. Maltase converts complex sugar from grains into glucose. Lactase, you've heard often about people that are lactose intolerant. These are many people throughout the world. That's where they have trouble digesting milk sugar. Phytase helps to produce the B vitamins, and sucrase digests most sugars. As I mentioned, supplementing with enzymes is a great first step. There's no contraindications, and you can generally only help the digestive process. Let's talk about leaky gut. We hear this a lot in the popular lexicon. It's a term that's used for another concept called intestinal permeability. This refers to toxins and allergens from the GI tract that enter the bloodstream. A leaky gut contributes to allergies, autoimmune disorders, and inflammation. Symptoms include abdominal pain, food allergies, and intolerance, along with cognitive and memory problems. A leaky gut also increases the risk of alcoholism, autism, ADHD, and food and chemical sensitivities. Think about the leaky gut as the physical loss of the internal boundary that is supposed to take in the good nutrients but keep out the negative. And the leaky gut, as you'll see here, a schema of the healthy gut versus the leaky gut. On the left, you see a normal intestinal permeability, intestinal barrier. You see the intestinal content, the mucus layer, the epithelial intestinal cells that are going to allow in what it needs and keep out the allergens, the antigens. Now on the right, you see a gut, remember our image, our metaphor of a torn up sponge that's just falling apart and allowing in things that it shouldn't. And you see some of these undigested proteins, gluten, casein, pathogens getting through and creating inflammation, contributing to almost an exposure or an ongoing assault on the immune system that causes a reaction in the immune system leading to allergies. Now, some of this, as we know in celiac disease, is a genetic concern, and some of it is lifestyle related as well. So what are the contributors to leaky gut? Low dietary fiber, an excess of harmful microbiota, alcohol, age can contribute to a leaky gut, Crohn's disease. This is why we get lots of good results eliminating casein and gluten in Crohn's. Cystic fibrosis, rheumatoid arthritis, atopic eczema. You'll see a lot of leaky gut co-occur with skin problems. HIV, the use of NSAIDs, a major contributing factor to inflammation, not only in the stomach, but in the small intestine, and of course, antibiotic use. Stress, we know there are complex neuroendocrine exchanges that lead to exacerbation and inflammation of the gut wall under stress. A concept called SIBO, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. And then the gluten protein in people who are either allergic or sensitive. The gluten protein is called gliadin. It triggers zonulin, a protein that increases the permeability between walls of the digestive tract. It leads to system-wide inflammation that then in turn affects neurological function, autoimmune function, leading to mental health. And this is another place that I start with clients who come to me. They may complain of digestive problems or certainly depression. Whenever someone talks about chronic depression, I certainly look at stress, look at adverse life events, but I want to look at gluten sensitivity. And this is a very simple elimination diet of gluten, or in the resource section, you'll find a lab where you can do testing for gluten sensitivity. We've spent time talking about the first brain. Let's talk about the second brain, digestion and mental health. In order to have good mental health, not only do we need to support the first brain, but what we call the second brain, the enteric nervous system. What is the second brain? It is the brain in our gut. And here you see an image of the gut's brain, known as the enteric nervous system, and it's located in the sheath of tissues lining the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestine, and the colon. The esteemed researcher, Dr. Gershon, coined the term the second brain. And I think in our lives, we use this term quite often when we refer to, oh, I feel that in my gut, or my gut tells me, or I've got butterflies in my gut, something's not right. I think we know that we receive information from our gut, and now we know scientifically the reasons behind it. And we also understand one of the primary functions of the second brain is to generate neurotransmitters for the brain, the first brain. The second brain is part of what's called the microbiome. This is the intestinal tract, or what we refer to as the gut. It's a major source of neurotransmitters. It's known as the enteric nervous system. It controls the digestive system, and there's a bidirectional relationship and communication between the first brain and the second brain. Here is the gastrointestinal tract. We begin with the salivary glands, the tongue, the esophagus, goes down to the liver and the stomach, the pancreas, and then, of course, the intestines, and then the elimination process. It's a long system of hollow organs that are joined together, creating an unbroken tube that begins at the mouth and ends at the anus. The second brain and digestion. The second brain controls the breakdown and absorption of foods and eliminates waste. Again, the rhythms of peristalsis that move food along the digestive tract. It transforms food into chemical messengers, which are our neurotransmitters that support emotional and cognitive well-being. Bacteria, remember that wonderful probiotic bacteria when we get our hands dirty in the gardens, when we're eating fermented foods, that helps develop the neurotransmitters that regulate brain function. And we know from research, literally, that getting our hands dirty, getting them in the dirt, transmits healthy bacteria. It's not only that gardening is fun, gardening gives us good bacteria for the brain. How food nourishes your brain, mind, and emotions. Food is made up of carbohydrates, proteins, fats, water, vitamins, and minerals. Digestion breaks down these foods into smaller particles so they can be absorbed into the bloodstream. Now, many of you who have studied nutrition are going to know this. I'm going to go through just a very basic overview to orient some of you for whom this may be new information. And I'll give you some resources where you can study this or learn about it in more depth. Digestion releases the nutrients in food so that the body can utilize them. This process takes place in the GI tract, also called the second brain. Proteins, fats, and carbs. Here you see an image of a brain synapse. You see the axon, the synaptic vesicles, then the synapse, the dendrites and the receptors and the neurotransmitter. This is where so much activity takes place, where we require good fats for lubrication of that communication of neurotransmitters across the synapse. And this is when we hear about serotonin reuptake inhibitors, is where those drugs are designed to pool or collect those neurotransmitters before uptake. Protein, fats, and carbs work together to support the brain. Sugar, glucose, amino acids, and fats lubricate and ease the connection at the synapse. Too much or too little, being out of balance, is going to create an imbalance that then has a negative effect on mood and cognitive function. Let's take coffee as a very simple example. A little bit of coffee is going to increase dopamine, it's going to increase focus, it's going to help attention, but too much coffee is going to deplete GABA and induce anxiety and insomnia. So what we're talking about in this whole approach in integrative medicine for mental health is finding where the imbalance is, finding where there's too much and helping a client decrease it, and finding where there's too little and helping to increase it. And we do that in every modality that we're exploring. It's the balance, the yin and the yang, the hyper and the hypo. What are some essential steps to nourish the second brain? Eat only when relaxed. Incorporate rituals of mindfulness before meals. Chew food until it's almost liquid. Reduce or eliminate medications that impair hydrochloric acid function. Ensure sufficient digestive enzymes. Identify each organ of digestion and ensure it's working well. Many people take for granted that they're going to have a digestive problem, and socially and through advertising it seems that people are led to believe that it's natural, and then they can just grab some kind of medication to suppress the symptom. But in our work in integrative approaches, we want to find the cause and eliminate the symptom. And so whenever I can reduce the use of pharmaceutical drugs, whether they're over-the-counter or prescribed, and identify cause, eliminate causative factors, and then find natural approaches that don't have their side effects, I want to provide that for my client. One of the ways I do that is during the assessment process, where I go through every step from the mouth to the esophagus, whether they've got GERD, whether they have ulcers, whether they've got colitis, the liver, do they have fatty liver disease, have they been heavy drinkers. I want to get a sense from them every step of the way how they feel about their digestion. I have found that people are really out of touch with their digestion. They're often aware of distress, but they're not quite sure where their distress is coming from. I'll often say, how is your elimination? And someone may touch their stomach. And I'll ask them, do you know where your intestines are? And they don't. So sometimes our first steps are just in psychoeducation, educating people about their organs and how they contribute to their well-being and their good mental health. I keep a human model in my office where I can show different parts of the body and explain how the liver functions, what the gallbladder's about, what the intestine's about, what we can do about hemorrhoids. Now you may feel this is outside of your scope, and if it is, then you can educate, and then you can refer to someone who can bridge that for you. Remember earlier we discussed that's going to be up to you in defining your own scope of practice. I want to treat gut permeability, and that means eliminating certain foods and stress that exacerbates it, but also identifying the soothing foods. And I'm going to show you a very special salad that I make that uses cactus pods. Cactus is mucilaginous, and so when you think about foods that soothe intestinal permeability, think about foods like turmeric, think about glutamine, think about cactus and the mucilaginous foods, bananas, and psyllium is very soothing, and we'll explore those. But begin to think about soothing the irritated mucous membranes of the gut through using different foods. Eat a variety of prebiotic foods. Prebiotics are the foods that set the stage for the probiotics, the healthy bacteria, to grow. And these prebiotics are generally made of soluble and insoluble fibers. And then, of course, eat a variety of probiotic fermented foods. Remember Joe, my client, who loved his sauerkraut? Just get freshly made sauerkraut. And I was reading recently about kvass and all of these wonderful European-based recipes for fermented foods, and explore your culinary taste by integrating more fermented foods into your diet. And short of that, get a probiotic supplement. And I'll give you some resources in the resource section of what I think are the best pharmaceutical grade probiotics. And then follow food combination principles. When my clients have tried everything to feel better and they're still suffering with some digestive upset, that's where I say, let's simplify your food combinations. So remember, we explored that. Protein goes well with leafy greens. It doesn't mix well with starchy carbs. So keep your food simple, maybe a mono diet for several days, along with those digestive enzymes. Let's look at proteins and the second brain. And here you see beautiful wild salmon. Avoid the farmed salmon. If you're going to eat salmon, and it can be very expensive, and you can't get wild salmon so efficiently or with cost savings, go for a good can of wild salmon or dried wild salmon or packaged wild salmon. But almost all Atlantic salmon is farmed salmon, so you want to avoid that. Consider food as your medicine. So when you're spending some money on food, you're investing in your medicine. Proteins fuel every function of living cells. Meat, poultry, legumes, nuts, plants, some plants, eggs and dairy are some of our main protein food groups. These proteins must be broken down by digestion into amino acids in order to be used by the body. The amino acids, in turn, are the building blocks of neurotransmitters that support brain function. Sufficient good quality protein is essential for a good mood. A low protein diet can contribute to low mood. A low quality protein can contribute to low mood. This is why if someone is not eating enough protein due to poverty or poor food access, food insecurity, or perhaps even is on a vegan diet or vegetarian diet without paying attention to getting enough good quality protein to support brain function, this is all a risk factor for depression and anxiety. Our protein requirements are different for everyone, and they're based on individual biochemistry. And we'll continue to explore throughout our work together this concept of the individual need, individual biochemical needs. We need protein in times of stress, because protein supports growth and repair in the body. And growth and repair breaks down. Muscle breaks down during times of stress. We need more protein if we're doing vigorous exercise. As a general rule, women need a little less protein than do men. But as we age, we may need a little bit more protein along with muscle building exercise to maintain balance and counteract the effects of muscle breakdown that occurs and leads to frailty and falls. Protein is so essential to a good mood. I always ask, as we did in the Good Mood and Food Diary, what kind of protein you're eating and how much throughout the day. Protein gives us energy. Alcohol and drug recovery, people I have found very rarely have a good diet. Often they have poor quality proteins. It's often very refined carb heavy. And so with these individuals, I start out very simply. I teach them how to use a crock pot, how to make bone broth. They might like some beans too, but I like a simple protein that's easily digested, that doesn't ask a lot of the body, but gives a lot of nourishment easily. And also people may be just new to making food for themselves as an act of self-nourishment. The other thing that I like to use in these cases is collagen. And you can get a very good quality beef or sometimes seafood collagen, and you can add it to smoothies or make a drink of it. This is a very simple, very easily digested approach to intake of protein. And I guarantee you our clients are going to feel much better within a matter of a few weeks. Protein and diets. Protein from animal foods have a better amino acid profile than plant proteins. You're going to get more of what you need. People who eat the standard American diet, what we know as the SAD diet, because it makes us sad, consume poor quality protein at nearly twice the amount necessary. So one of the principles I ask you to consider is if you're getting a good quality protein, you don't need as much of it to get even better benefits. So it's worth spending a little money on some organic beef bones or a good organic chicken or 4 ounces or 8 ounces of wild salmon, because that will serve you for your daily protein needs. Vegetarians may underconsume proteins and overconsume simple carbs and sugar. Some people are natural carnivores, some people are natural vegetarians, many people are in between. And so our task is to help people identify the foods that are best for their body, best for their engine. An inadequate digestion of proteins rather than insufficient intake can cause protein deficiency. That's where it's not just what we take in, but it's how well we're able to digest it. Protein and satiety. Here on the right, you'll see a hunger satiety scale, and I can ask my client to fill out this scale. Whereas number 1, after you eat, you're so hungry you want to eat anything you can, and ending at number 10, you've eaten so much, you're very uncomfortable, maybe even painful. And I use this scale as a self-awareness exercise following the Mood Food Diary, so that I can help a client get in touch with how they're feeling and how satisfied they're feeling. Food is as much about satisfaction and a sense of self-nourishment as it is about the chemicals and the metabolism of food that people are undergoing. And so we're always working with that level of self-awareness. And so feel free to use this hunger and satiety scale to build awareness. It's very useful, of course, with people with binge eating or night eating disorders as well, to use it as a check to really tune in to feeling states. So proteins, along with vegetables, are part of what's called the satiety complex. That is what is going to make you feel satisfied, along with fats. That's the question of being gratified or fed. Fullness and satiety is important, especially when making dietary changes. People will not stick to a change for their health if they're not feeling satisfied. Fat in the second brain. Fats provide energy and lubrication for the brain and insulation for the body organs. They're essential for the absorption of nutrients. And if we are undergoing the most important revolution, it is in recognizing that fat is not the cause of heart disease. Fat is actually an essential food source that there is no reason to be afraid of. What there is to be afraid of is bad quality fats. We need to have fat to digest and metabolize what are called the fat-soluble hormones, or vitamins. In the case of vitamin A, vitamin D, which is technically a neurohormone, vitamin E, and vitamin K. All of these require fat for transport to the cells. Now, the three main categories of dietary fats are saturated, monosaturated, and polyunsaturated. Those are among the best types of fat for mental health. And there's no need to be afraid of saturated fats either. You remember we discussed it's the fats that are artificial, that are synthetic, that are not found in nature by and large. Now keep in mind, vitamin A, D, E, and K are essential for mental well-being. Vitamin A for lung health and for immune function, vitamin D for mental health, to treat depression and to support immune function, and for the treatment of pain. Vitamin E is essential as an antioxidant and to use for circulation and the circulatory system. And vitamin K, so essential not only for mental well-being, but for bone health and for endocrine function. Your mantra, do not be afraid of fats. The brain is made up of almost 60% fat, mostly DHA, deoxyhexanoic acid. Fats from animals, vegetables, nuts, and seeds extracted via a cold process, often called virgin oils, can be integrated into your diet daily. This is a very simple intervention that brings wonderful rewards. Eggs, a very good source of fat and also rich in a type called choline, a phospholipid in the daily diet. Use it for brain and memory support. There's evidence for supplementation of both DHA and EPA for mental health. And if you've already begun supplementing with fish oil or krill oil, you'll notice that each oil that you look at will have a different ratio of EPA to DHA. And there's a tremendous amount of research out there. Some of it suggests that men do better on EPA-rich oil, women do better on a DHA-rich oil. Some people suggest that certain types of depression or bipolar do better on EPA. Some conditions like the psychotic disorders do better higher in DHA. I'll provide you with some references, and this is ongoing research, so stay tuned to some of the findings in human studies. It's very important when you take a fish oil or krill oil or a phospholipid to supplement with vitamin E, a comprehensive full-spectrum vitamin E, because you don't want any kind of rancidity or breakdown or oxidation. And keep in mind that oils, fresh oils, go rancid, and so some oils you'll want to keep in the refrigerator upon opening. The need for DHA and EPA changes at different life stages. We need more DHA early in life. This comes out of breast milk, for example, where we need to support brain structure. EPA throughout middle life is more important. It targets cardiovascular health. But then again, as we age, DHA comes into play where we need to support brain structure and prevent the breakdown. There's some marvelous research being conducted by the military, for example, in high-dose delivery of fish oil to people undergoing a traumatic brain injury at the time of the injury. And so there's very good research out there. I encourage you to explore it. And we'll explore protocols for the use of fish oil and fats a little bit later. Let's try to deconstruct the myth of the dangers of saturated fats. Saturated fats, like you see here in coconut, they're antibacterial, antifungal, and anti-inflammatory. Look to your traditional fats, your authentic fats, butter, coconut, tallow, and suet from the cows and lambs, ducks, geese, chickens, and turkey, lard, leaf lard from pigs. Natural saturated fats are high in butyric acid. That's found in butter. Lauric acid is found in coconut oil and palm oil. Myristic acid is found in dairy products. Palmitic acid is found in meat and palm oil, and stearic acid in meat and cocoa butter. A little bit of saturated fat every day is helpful for you and your four-legged friends. Trans fats is an umbrella term used, and these are the fats to avoid. These are commercially created fats. They do not occur in nature. They're an unhealthy contaminant byproduct of commercial hydrogenation of vegetable oils. These are your creamy fake oils like margarine or better butter, some of these fake butter substitutes, or Crisco shortening. Those kinds of fats are to be avoided like the plague. How about our monosaturated fats? Here you see what used to be called poor person's butter, the avocado. An avocado a day will keep the doctor away. Avocado and avocado oil, olives, olive oil, and tree nuts are very rich in the monosaturated fats. Use olive oil mainly as a raw oil. You can cook with a little bit of it, but not at too high temperatures. You don't want to deep fry in olive oil, for example. Olive oil is medicinal. It's rich in chlorophyll. When you're looking to buy olive oil, you want to buy it in either a can or a dark green or brown bottle. When it's exposed to the light, the chlorophyll will be lost. And remember, chlorophyll is just one molecule different from our blood, from our human hemoglobin. And so chlorophyll is essential. It is the lifeblood of plants. And that's one of the benefits of a nice dark green olive oil. That's what you're looking for when you're buying it. Make sure it's not adulterated. There's a number of products coming out of Italy. Greece has good olive oil, California, Chile. Do your research on a good quality olive oil. It's medicine. Choose full fat dairy. Eliminate any dairy that you're using that are called skim milk or half skim. We've already discussed milk should be avoided anyway, cow's milk. But get your full fat. You'll get the full vitamins and minerals, your saturated fats. A little bit of that is not going to hurt you. Choose from lamb, beef, and wildlife such as deer, elk, moose, and bear if you're hunting. Polyunsaturated fats. Avoid soybean, corn oil, sunflower oil. Choose your nuts and your seeds, your leafy greens, fatty fish such as salmon, tuna, herring. These are particularly good for you. Herring, mackerel, and sardines, very rich in vitamin A, very good for the skin, by the way. And they're very good they're very rich in purines. So some people benefit, people who have very fast metabolisms, or benefit from a purine-rich diet. They're low in saturated fat, they're cholesterol-free, and they contain generally two types of essential fatty acids. These are the fats you can only get through your dietary intake, omega-3 and omega-6. Avoid, when you're shopping, avoid anything that says hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated. And I begin here when I educate my clients. I say, go to a food co-op that's offering a shopping class, how to read labels. Give a handout about how to read labels. That's where the consciousness raising begins. We know that these hydrogenated products impair immune function. They cause liver damage. They impair reproductive health. There's damage to the lungs and digestive orders. They contribute to learning delays, weight gain, and neurological problems. Polyunsaturated fats become rancid. They're toxic when used, even more toxic when fried, contributing to inflammation, depression, and pain. One of the major contributing factors to our epidemic of pain in the United States is, I believe, the chronic and excessive use of these poor quality fats and oils. Let's look at essential fatty acids, also called EFAs. They're essential to health and mental health recovery. They have to be obtained from foods, and there are three main types: omega-3, linolenic acid, omega-6, linoleic acid, and arachidonic acid. This is the first step in mental health recovery: identifying your good quality fats and changing out the bad fats. There's also in phospholipids a special type of fat. This is a type of fat that comprise neuronal membranes, and they support the communication between neurons. Remember the image earlier of the synapse. Problems in phospholipid metabolism contribute to major depression, schizophrenia, and bipolar disorder, along with the autism spectrum. This research is not new. This was a theory of mental distress going as far back as the 50s. And it is now being reviewed and renewed again in the lab and with human studies to understand phospholipid metabolism. Carbohydrates and the second brain. Note carbohydrates and what comprises carbohydrates: fruits and grains, vegetables. We see some legumes here as well. Carbohydrates regulate fat metabolism and generate energy. Sugars, starches, and fibers that are simple, called simple carbs, fruits, vegetables, and sugars, or complex, whole grains, starchy vegetables, and beans. We use the enzymes amylase and lactase. Prebiotics cannot be digested by the body, and they serve as food for the probiotics. And so we have a lot of prebiotics in these fibers and the fibrous tissues, for example, fruit skins. Carbohydrates break down into glucose and lactose, which support brain function. The brain needs glucose. It just doesn't need a shot of it coming from refined sugar. Fiber is a complex carbohydrate. It's essential to colon health. There's no calories or food energy. It's just a crucial component. And this is something that we notice also with the SAD diet, is that people aren't getting enough of good quality fiber, and that contributes to chronic intestinal problems. Fiber passes through the digestive tract much like you might sweep through the debris in your home. The fiber carries debris, creates a bulky sense with water, and sweeps through and pulls out that waste, and also forms the fecal matter that then allows elimination. That's why improving and increasing fiber in your diet is one of the first ways to counteract constipation. Fiber causes microbes in the gut to release acetate that signals stop eating, and that suppresses appetite. And that's why when you have someone who does not feel sated or who feels that they're eating and binging too much, adding fiber to the diet is going to be very useful. And this is also why we use fiber, often in the form of psyllium, to slow down blood glucose uptake in people with diabetes type 2. Now, there are two types of fiber. One's called soluble. Here you see some figs. It slows down digestion by absorbing water. It forms the gel in the digestive tract. It increases the feeling of fullness. It slows down the rate at which the stomach empties, thereby increasing satiety. And some examples are oat bran, nuts, seeds, beans, lentils, psyllium, peas, chia seeds, barley, and some fruits and vegetables. Insoluble fiber absorbs water and puffs up like a sponge, passing through the digestive tract, helping to push through waste materials. That's what we use to prevent constipation, though frankly, a mix of soluble and insoluble is perfect in daily diet. We find insoluble in wheat bran, though I don't encourage the use of wheat bran or even corn or whole grains, perhaps like rice. Oat bran, oatmeal, a good quality oatmeal might be indicated for some people. I prefer recommending seeds and nuts, maybe some brown rice as long as there's no arsenic in it, flaxseed, and the skins of fruits and vegetables. I encourage my clients to enjoy the skins, most of the skins of fruits and vegetables. Fiber and fermented foods. I've discussed the role of fermented foods. Let's look at some of the best fermented foods. Yogurt and cheeses with live cultures. These are almost pre-digested dairy products. They're already broken down by bacteria, making them more easily digested. Nevertheless, I still encourage the use of sheep or goat milk in contrast to cow milk. Kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, miso is another fermented food that comes out of Asian cultures. Kombucha originated in Russia, fermented teas, microalgae can be fermented, brewer's yeast, and Yakult. Now, one of the things that we see in our modern diet is that we have 10 times less fiber in our diet. And so understanding the role of returning to ancestral diet, increasing fiber, we also know that we have an imbalance of a ratio of omega-6 fatty acids to the omega-3. In ancestral diet, we had far more omega-3. But in our modern SAD diet, we have omega-6s generally predominating. And so understanding that it's not just food quality, food type, but also food ratios that are going to make the difference in helping us align with what nature meant for us to be eating. Prebiotics. These are soluble, indigestible dietary fibers that support bacteria in the colon. And I call it the colonic garden. That's where all the bacteria can grow and propagate to support neurotransmitter function, decrease and keep at bay the negative bacteria which are associated with the development, for example, of colon cancer. What are some good prebiotics to try? Raw and cooked onions, garlic, Jerusalem artichokes, leeks, asparagus, wheat, beans, bananas, agave, dandelion, and chicory root. And if you're looking for a good substitute for coffee, look for a substitute that has chicory root in it. Now, probiotics have another name called psychobiotics, and that is due to the recognition of the role that probiotics play on our psyche. A psychobiotic is a live organism that, when ingested in adequate amounts, produces a health benefit in patients suffering from psychiatric illness. Probiotic supplements may be bought in capsule or liquid form or in health food stores and should be taken with food, not on an empty stomach. There are 400 to 500 different kinds of healthy microbiota in the gut. And again, the idea is balance. We want to increase the pro and decrease the negative bacteria. They promote healthy digestion. They prevent infections, diarrhea, inflammation. They're the core of our immune function. They produce nutrients such as vitamin K, B vitamins, short-chain fatty acids like lactic acid and folate. I want to introduce you to my chia smoothie, and I've provided you this recipe. This is a unique prebiotic. It's a mix of both soluble and insoluble fiber. It's also rich in omega-3 fatty acids. And one ancestral dietary practice is to drink a glass of water with chia seeds every day. And here I've given you a chia seed smoothie, and you can add chia seed to any smoothie that you wish. It's very mucilaginous, so it's again very good for leaky gut. Probiotics and GABA. Probiotics produce GABA and serotonin. They reduce stress and decrease anxiety. A very simple addition to a complementary approach to reducing stress and anxiety. They ease digestive problems by regulating GABA. They lower the stress response in the gut. GABA is our natural tranquilizer. And finally, we come to the end of the north-south axis to elimination. And here you see our large intestine, also called the colon. Peristalsis is a rhythm. And you recall that we're relaxing to allow peristalsis to do its job. One of the ways laxatives work, whether they're artificial or herbal, is that they increase peristalsis. They cause the colon to contract and increase the movement. For example, Cenopods, or we buy a product called Senocot, for example. Now, laxatives will help in a pinch, but they can be harsh. And sometimes we see an abuse of laxatives among people with eating disorders. And so I like to preserve a laxative in herbal form for a problem, a serious problem, but I'd rather deal with constipation through relaxation and also the increase of fiber and water in the diet. What are some symptoms of poor elimination? I want to ask my client how often they're eliminating. There should be an elimination pretty much equivalent to every meal that you eat, once or twice a day, maybe 3 times, but certainly once a day at the minimum. What's the quality and the ease of elimination? Is there a lot of strain? Are there hemorrhoids, a sign of strain? Mental health and elimination is intimately tied to the experience of physical and sexual abuse. Certainly there are high rates of colitis and IBS in people who've experienced adverse childhood events. We know that stress produces peptides that regulate the excess motility or the excess function of peristalsis in the gut. We know from research that children with chronic constipation often have physical sexual abuse, meaning that there's a high correlation between exposure to physical or sexual abuse and the development of chronic constipation. So it's a risk factor. Anal relaxation is a rare finding in what's called retentive constipation. I've worked with a number of people who were anally penetrated or raped, and they suffer oftentimes from hemorrhoids, from chronic constipation, and often anal spasms as well. And then, of course, we have this concept of medically unexplained symptoms associated with adverse childhood events. This is where we might look to the combination of body work, of touch, of this abdominal massage I've shown you, of nutrition, along with counseling and movement, to help bring about balance to these endogenous rhythms that help guide our health and well-being. In summary, digestive problems are often involved in mental distress. Leaky gut leads to the passage of intestinal content into the bloodstream that does not belong there and causes a whole host of physical and emotional problems. Both the first and the second brain are part of the digestive process. Fats are essential to brain health. Don't be afraid of good quality fats. They're essential for EPA and DHA. Trans fats, on the other hand, are dangerous for our mental health. The requirements for fats change according to gender and our stage of life. Probiotics are also called psychobiotics. They increase GABA and the anxiolytic neurotransmitters. Fiber is essential to satiety and colon health. And probiotics in the form of supplements or fermented foods set the stage for the colonic garden to grow. So here's to your healthy digestive process. Thank you.